I'm going to do my very best to get through another video without spluttering, but Arthur Pint says, could you pose this question to your students? Who would you choose to lead peace negotiations between Iran and Israel? A, Putin if he's alive. B, Putin if he's dead. C, one of Putin's impersonators, in the case of Putin being dead or alive. Or D, a packet of Smedley's frozen peas. Answer, D, because a packet of Smedley's frozen peas is the only option about which its existence is not open to question. I rather enjoy that. But, you know, every so often I feel, because I've made a great fuss of pointing out that I think Putin's death, as reported on October the 26th last year, by the General SVR Telegram channel, if you believe that less than reliable source, but it was also reported, it was discussed in things like the New Statesman as well, and a variety of perfectly reputable newspapers and outlets, and then suddenly it stopped. And I'm not sure that cessation is reasonable and is based on any evidence. There is more evidence in my mind that Putin is dead than there is evidence that he is alive, and particularly given the doppelganger obsession and his reluctance to for the real Putin to actually touch flesh at that incredibly long table. So, you know, Putin's death is rumoured more often than the reappearance of Halley's Comet, and yet here we are still waiting for proof one way or the other. The story naturally starts with a fall, not from political grace, but I think from his bed. And you imagine the scene, it's past 9 p.m. in the gilded corridors of Putin's Valdai residence, and perhaps there was a knock of porcelain on the floor as the president's head collided with a tray of Russian delicacies, and there he lay, victim of what was claimed to be cardiac arrest, or maybe he was knocked out by a particularly delicious Russian dumpling. Quite the dignified end for a man known for his bare-chested horseback rides, but an end which is paralleled by the end of Stalin. He also died on his own because people were too terrified to open the door. The General SVR channel, which surely has its finger on the pulse, if not the defibrillator, reported that emergency medical staff was summoned, but alas could not save the Kremlin's strongman. Putin, they claimed, had shuffled off this mortal coil by the evening of October the 26th, leaving behind a legacy of autocratic governance, shirtless photo ops, and, lest we forget, a war in Ukraine, which was not described as a war, which was a special military operation. The fun, of course, doesn't end there. Russian political analyst Valery Solovey, think of him as sort of Slavic Nostradamus with dubious credentials, piled on to the rumour mill, confirming the tale in an interview, stating that Putin's death was humiliating but deserved. And Solovey, who once predicted a great deal of events that never materialised, sounded so confident that one might almost have believed him. Perhaps he was picturing the Russian elite gathering around the cold corpse, exchanging whispers like he really could have upgraded to a Smeg fridge rather than stick with the Soviet ZIL or Minsk model. But let's not be premature. The premature death of Vladimir Putin, we shouldn't revel in that. After all, no rumour of a Russian leader's demise would be complete without a robust denial from the Kremlin's professional truth-bender, Dmitry Peskov. Nonsense, he muttered with all the conviction of a man who had denied this sort of thing many times in the past, more times than he'd eaten a decent borscht. Meanwhile, Sergei Lavrov, Putin's foreign minister and an occasional denier-in-chief, claimed that Putin was in perfect health during a French TV interview, likely uttered with while the host nodded in bewildered compliance. Who wouldn't trust Lavrov after all these years of stellar credibility? What makes this saga truly delicious, though, is the utter absurdity of it all. Was Putin really replaced by a body double, as the British tabloids eagerly suggested? One can almost imagine the Kremlin's secret auditions for the role, can't you? Do you have the right amount of smugness? Can you ride a horse while exuding menace? How do you feel about Botox? The point is, the Putin that we see today looks shifty. The Putin that I remember looked from under hooded eyes directly at you and was terrifying. The fact that British outlets like the Daily Star and the Sunday Mirror ran with such bold headlines, "Putin may already be dead," is testament to the irresistible allure of the despot's demise, particularly when the alternative is continuing to report on his endless appearances at endless Victory Day parades, blanketed knees and all. And there's something comforting in the sheer Britishness of our reaction to these rumours of Putin's end. And while the end in terminal end rather than backside, rear, arse, the arse end of Putin, while Russians denied the whole business with a furrowed brow and a press release, we engaged in some good old-fashioned speculation over tea, biscuits and tabloid fodder. And so we should. We should continue to do so. We should mock. Oh, don't mock! We should mock. If Putin really has a body double or 5, does it matter if the real Putin is actually still alive? As one wag put it, whether it's the original tyrant or a well-botoxed clone, the damage is all the same. The continuity of Russian despotism is as reliable as the post. And one thing is true, one thing is absolutely true, that if we're ever going to remember Putin, it is as a man encased in some solid, tank-like iron fridge. There we are, in a fridge, propping up the frozen Smedley peas, so that it's almost impossible to disentangle the frozen peas, the frozen broccoli, from the dislodged Putin's piles. This contrast between that irresponsible embalmment, like something out of a Peter Cushing movie. I have been dead fully 5 minutes, and my soul has not left my body. And the orchidaceous display of grief that smothered the grave of Alexei Navalny, that spontaneous burst of popular grief, popular support in the face of the tyrannous suppression. Where are the flowers for Putin? They don't exist. In the case of these persistent tales of Putin's demise, they give us a fascinating look at Russia's opaque political theatre. Whether or not the man himself is actually alive is secondary to the careful management of his image by himself and by whoever is mastering his image post-life. He is the El Cid of Russian confection. He has ridden out of history into legend, rather like a decrepit version of Charlton Heston. After all, this is the leader who has done more to blur the lines between fact and fiction than most. Fitting, therefore, that his very existence might now be a work of political myth-making. So as the rumours swirl and the Kremlin scrambles to maintain its grip on reality, one thing remains certain. Whether dead, alive, or somewhere in between, Putin's legacy is as inescapable as a Soviet-era fridge. Cold, heavy, and impossible to move without a great deal of effort. This is Schrödinger's cat for the 21st century. Meow!